Hi everyone, I'm Doc Ken and welcome to the overview of the National Service Training Program. So what are the objectives for this chapter? One is to describe the outline of the history of the National Service Training Program of the Philippines and to identify the provisions of the RA 9163 and its implementing rules and regulations for a better understanding of the purpose and requirements of the program. The Republic Act Number 9163, otherwise known as the National Service Training Program Act of 2001. It is a program aimed at enhancing civic consciousness and defense preparedness in the youth by developing the ethics of service and patriotism while undergoing training in any of its three program components. Its various components are specially designed to enhance the youth active contribution to the general welfare. This law was signed by former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo in response to the public interest for the reform of ROTZ. This program was made mandatory to all students, male and female, starting school year 2002 to 2003 of any baccalaureate degree course or at least two-year technical vocational courses in public and private educational institution which are obliged to undergo one of the three program components as requisite for graduation. Let's now move on to the three components of the National Service Training Program. Just remember the acronym RELIC. RE stands for Reserve Officers Training Corps or ROTC. LI stands for Literacy Training Service or LTS. And lastly, C stands for Civic Welfare Training Service or CWTS. First, let's talk about ROTC. Reserve Officers Training Corps is a program under Sections 38 and 39 of Republic Act Number 7077 designed to provide military training to tertiary level students in order to motivate, train, organize, and mobilize them for national defense preparedness. The ROTC under the NSTP shall instill patriotism, moral virtues, respect for rights of civilians, and adherence to the Constitution, among others. This program component is intended to prepare and equip the students with knowledge, skills, and attitude in carrying out national service in the event of national emergencies and to assist the socio-economic development of the country and as well as to prepare the college students for possible service in defense establishment in event of emergency. Next, Literacy Training Service or LTS is a component of NSTP that focuses on training students to become teachers of reading, writing literacy, and numeracy to children, out of school youth, and other segments of society. Education students are primary target of this component, but other students from other colleges are equally encouraged to choose it. Teaching unprivileged segment of society which did not get formal education is a great way to be helped in building our nation. And last component, we have Civic Welfare Training Service or CWTS, refers to a program of activities contributory to enhance the civic consciousness of students by developing the value of service and commitment for the general welfare and betterment of life of all members of the community. It also aims to strengthen the students' active participation in the program and activities intended to uplift the different dimensions of development, especially those devoted to improving health, education, environment, entrepreneurship, safety, recreation, and morals of the citizenry. Let's now move on to the brief timeline of the legal foundations before the creation of the National Service Training Program or NSTP. Just remember the acronym CPR. C stands for Commonwealth Act Number 1, also known as the National Defense Act. P stands for Presidential Decree 1706, also known as the National Service Law. R stands for Republic Act 7077, commonly known as the Citizen Armed Forces of the Philippines Reservists Act. First, the National Defense Act of 1935, also known as Commonwealth Act Number 1. This law was passed by the Philippine National Assembly on December 21, 1935. The purpose of this act was to create an independent Philippine military, a move interrupted by the outbreak of the Second World War, which requires all male citizens between 18 to 30 years of age to undergo training in order to provide a military service in preparation for a possible war as an obligation of every male citizen. Next, Presidential Decree Number 1706, otherwise known as the National Service Law. This law was signed by former President Ferdinand Marcos on August 8, 1980. It made national service obligatory for all Filipino citizens and specified three categories of national service in any of the three: civic welfare service, law enforcement service, and military service. This law was used to amend Commonwealth Act Number 1. And lastly, Republic Act 7077, otherwise known as the Citizen Armed Forces of the Philippines Reservists Act. This law was enacted by the 8th Congress of the Philippines on June 27, 1991. The Reservists Act provided for organization, training, and utilization of the service, referred to in the Act as citizen soldiers. The primary pool of manpower for the reservist organization are graduates of the ROTC basic and advanced courses. With this law, the Citizen Army Training or CAT in high school and ROTC in college were formed. Let's now move on to the summary of the chapter. RA 9163, also known as the National Service Training Program Act of 2001. This law was signed to reform ROTC because of the public clamor and interest. NSTP has three components. What are those? Just remember the acronym RELIC. RE stands for Reserve Officers Training Corps or ROTC, which focuses on military training. LE stands for Literacy Training Service or LTS, which focuses on training students to become teachers of reading, writing, literacy, and numeracy for children, out of school youth, and other segments of society. And lastly, C stands for Civic Welfare Training Service or CWTS, which focuses on the general welfare and betterment of life of all members of the community in terms of improving health, education, environment, entrepreneurship, safety, recreation, and morals of citizenry. Next, legal foundations of NSTP. Just remember the acronym CPR. C stands for Commonwealth Act Number 1, also known as the National Defense Act, which had an intention to create an independent Philippine military that requires all male citizens between 18 to 30 years of age to undergo training. Next, P. Presidential Decree 1706, also known as the National Service Law, which requires all Filipino citizens to render national service in any of the three main programs, namely Civic Welfare Service, Law Enforcement Service, and Military Service. And lastly, R. Republic Act 7077, also known as Citizen Armed Forces of the Philippines Reservists Act, that provides for training and utilization of reservists to maintain a regular force in case of war, rebellion, and rescue in times of different disasters.